Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farron, co-owner of the company Horns of Odin, and I'm joined, as always, by Dr. Mathias Nordvik.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Today we're joined by Mario Francis, who is an Army veteran and a Norse pagan as well. Welcome to the show, Mario.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Of course. Thank you very much. Thank you for jumping in last minute as well. I feel like this episode has been cursed from the start. Anybody who heard me laughing during the intro there, we're half an hour late recording this. Our producer has disappeared off the face of the earth. We don't know where Mike is, so we're trying to put this together last minute. Matthias has some wood, some guys chopping up trees and wood chipping right outside his window.
Plus a whole fucking ant colony on my desk. So I don't know what's happening here.
Absolutely. Mario's headset wasn't working. So we're really putting this together. So we apologize if it's not the same quality as usual. But we'll get through it, and I'm sure it will be awesome. So my other bitch to have is I don't even have a good drink to have. So I've got mead, quote unquote. I had a company email me, which I'm not going to say the name of because it's a bit shitty, but I really want to. They emailed me and asked if I wanted if we'd be interested in selling their mead. So I did the due diligence thing of asking for some samples, and they kindly sent me 6 full 75 cl bottles, which I thought was amazing. And then I tasted one. And usually I don't do this type of thing, but this really pissed me off. So I tasted one, and it didn't really taste like mead. It just tastes like a wine. It was like a white wine. So I did a little bit of digging and thinking, tasted them all, and then realized that what these guys are doing is they're buying white wine in cheap and then putting it in barrels at their site, mixing it with honey and maybe some flavoring, and then rebottling it from there and calling it mead, which that really fucking annoyed me, because we work with a meadery up in York, where the guy keeps his own bees, makes his own honey, makes it all traditionally, and it's all legit stuff. It's really nice. And then you get stuff like this that's more expensive but not actually mead. It's just a cheap shitty mix.
That sucks. What the hell? How can they get away with it, man?
Because apparently there's no regulations around mead like there is like whiskey, gin, rum. All those are regulated by the government. Whereas mead, because it kind of disappeared for a long time and then suddenly popped up again and is getting popular, there's no regulations, so people can literally just mix wine with honey and go, oh yeah, there you go, here's some. And it's like the bottle says, oh, traditional mead. I'm like, no, it's not. No, you can tell it's not, because you can tell it's wine. So I don't know if you're a drinker, Mario. If you're into mead,
I'm having some right now.
Well, there you go.
Wonderful.
Hopefully proper stuff, not white wine mixed with honey.
No, I get this stuff that's imported out of it's Denmark, Dansk Majord, which is just great to me.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of the best ones that you can find here in the US, if you ask me. There are some meaderies here and there. There are also meaderies that I haven't tried yet. There's what is it called, Brimminghorn, out in somewhere over east of where I am, that I'll definitely want to try at one point. But I feel like if you get store-bought mead, not meat, then the Danish stuff that you get around here is actually quite good.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you get is there a lot of meaderies over your way? Obviously, I'm in the UK, Mario, if you hadn't realized by my succulent voice. And we get people ordering a lot of mead, sending to ship over to the USA. So I didn't know whether it's pretty hard to get over there or if you guys just have shit mead.
I mean, I'll say this. I've tasted some shit mead and I was like, yeah, nope, never again. But then I've also tasted some Vikings, and we do have a couple of meaderies here in the state that I'm in, and they're actually pretty good. As far as wide range of flavors, different things, cherry, texture, so on and so forth. But there's so many different meaderies around here, and each mead has its own pairing. Like I found that if I pair it with like a different type of food each time, it's great. Or it's like, oh yeah, no, never gonna pair this again.
Mm-hmm.
But we do. It's hard to find.
Yeah, no, it's like a handful of like craft breweries out there, or meaderies, if I'm remember correctly. There's one up in Vermont that I want to try as well. What is it called? Gronfeld or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And but the farther west you get, the fewer there are.
Okay.
There's one here in actually in Boulder, in Colorado. But their meat is like ridiculously expensive. I think it's like $45 for a very small bottle of mead.
Just go in and that's it. Do you not know who I am? I'm fucking Mathias Norby. And see what this
door in and be like, give me mead.
do the Viking thing.
The Viking thing.
Take the mead. Whilst I'm bitching, I don't know if I told you this. Did I tell you about the Canadian meadery that stole my logo and company name? I don't know if I spoke about this or not. I woke up one day and like someone posted like the bottle of mead and like tagged Horns of Odin on Instagram, and I was like, that's not to do with me. So I kind of did some tracking, figured out there's a guy in Canada who'd just like literally taken my logo, the Horns of Odin name, like the title, how he wrote it, and just started making mead. And was like, and just selling out there with these bottles, like the logo and stuff. So I emailed them, and a few other people gave them a little bit of stick, and they did change it. But I was like, the cheek of it was like, oh no, I didn't realize it was a business. I just thought it was like a generic image for like the triple horn symbol. I'm like, no, if you type in Horns of Odin, like if you're going to start a business, the first thing you do is type that into Google, surely. Like that's what I do. So you type it into Google, like my company comes up the top. Like you can't get it mistaken. It's like, oh no, it was an honest mistake. I'm like fuck, it was. No, it wasn't. But obviously, I was very pleasant about it because they did the decent thing like pretty much straight away. So I was nice about it, and I didn't like blast it all over like social media or anything. But I was still, it's just cheeky. It's just like, why?
Do your research. It's not that hard. We live in the age where everything can be found at the drop of a hand.
Exactly.
Just do a modicum of research to find out what's going on, and there it is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that was one thing that I actually said to them. I was like, look, it's probably doing you guys more of a disservice than anything, because I don't think they were selling online. It was just like a little place selling. That's probably why they thought maybe I would never know, because they were just selling at like little markets and whatnot. And I was like, look, what your people are going to do is they're going to buy that, look at it, and go, okay, well, I'm not going to go maybe get it from the show again, so I'm going to look online, and they're going to assume it's me and then come buy off me anyway. So really, you kind of just shooting yourself in the foot. Just do your own cool thing. But hopefully they have. I haven't gone back and looked. But I thought that I told you about it, but apparently not.
No, man, that I'm surprised that even happened. Like that's a little crazy.
It's balls, eh? Because it's all we've got it all trademarked as well. So it's that was a nice thing to wake up to. So it was almost as bad as the start of this podcast. But we're getting there.
We're getting there. It's slowly.
I don't know if Mike's woke up wherever the fuck he is. Everyone just give him shit who's in the Discord. We're just gonna have to just
he's probably being like Foreman Giants thing, just getting some Giants milk.
Yes.
Absolutely. So Mario, the first thing I would like to start with talking about is you've been in the military obviously you're a veteran. I think Matthias said, did you serve Iraq and Afghanistan? Is that right?
I was in Operation Enduring Freedom, so it was around that time. So yeah, I got around 2012 and through 2016. So it's been too long in there.
Okay. Yeah. Because there's one thing that's always interested me is the connection that seems to be between kind of Nordic culture of Viking symbols, I guess, and the military, whether it's, I don't think it's exclusively the US military, but that tends to be maybe where I see things online, like people having the Valknut tattooed or on their hat or on the, like, I guess, patches on bags. But I assume it's a lot of different militaries as well. I just wonder if you had any thoughts on why that might be, as to why there does seem to be such a connection between this culture and present active military service.
I mean, so I have my theories about that. Because I did see a lot of it while I was in. But the fact that I didn't get into it until afterwards, but I saw quite a few people, and of course, there's this constant of, till Valhalla. It's a constant theme whenever people are getting deployed or things like that, or you're going on missions or whatever. But I would assume that there is a correlation and a parallel to what the imagined Viking raids were. You spend all the time in the military building up this camaraderie, this trust amongst the people that you're with, even if you don't know them personally. Mm-hmm. You're trust together and you are forced to work together to do everything. Everything you do, like even down to basic training, you can't even go to the bathroom by yourself. And so you take all of that, and then you take the warrior culture that is associated with the military, that warrior culture that's associated with, the Viking culture, Norse culture, things like that. And it's very easy to draw those parallels between the two. Mm-hmm. And I think that lends itself to a big part of it. By and large, the military is, maybe was at this point, I don't know, a warrior ethos culture. Mm-hmm. It is actually, the warrior ethos is actually a thing in the military. And so when you look at that and you look at the parallels to, Viking culture, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. Why it would be a thing. We do see it with Spartan culture, but it's even less so, despite the fact that there's so much iconography on bases about, Greek culture and so on, and Roman culture and so on. Viking culture really stands out. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's either due to a romanticization of what, going on a Viking was, but I think it's also just correlated to that sense of we are together doing one job. Even if we don't know each other, we are now brothers and sisters in this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's just, the Viking one always seems to stand out, and I always wondered whether that was because I'm in this world, I noticed it more, or whether like Viking symbolism was more than other warrior cultures, like you mentioned with the Spartans, the Romans, the Greeks. Because I've seen little bits of like Spartan helmets on things, but the one for me, but maybe it could just be a case of that I picked up on it more because I know what it is. And I do, especially the Valknut. The Valknut always seemed to be one that I saw, whether it was drawn or badges, that and the Punisher face. But that's a little bit different. That's one that I seem to have seen a lot of as well. But the Valknut one, and I always wondered why.
Yeah, I think if we go a little deeper for some, right, Odin is also a war god. The Valknut is associated with Odin to a lot of people, right? So that might also be one of the ways in which that one becomes more and more popular in as a symbol, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, one of the other things is that, you go into the military and you've never had a tattoo in your life, never really thought about one. More than likely, at some point, you're getting a tattoo. It's just one of those things. You go to any service member out there, and I guarantee you they either got maybe one or two tattoos. small or large, there's a tattoo there. And so there's a very old practice where you get protective symbols tattooed. And so you get like the Valknut, you get the Aegis Almra, or the Helm of Aa, as some people know it. You get the Vegbasir, you know, all these things, of course, correlate to, like, especially when you're on deployments. And so it's like, hey, I want to be protected while I'm out there. Hey, I want to be able to find my way home. Hey, I want to, you know, say that, hey, if I go, I go. And I'm prepared for that. It's a way of showing that strength or asking for strength. And so I think the other reason why it pops up is, I mean, so like I got my first tattoo when I was in the military as well. And I was looking at protection symbols, things like that. And of course, the very first thing that pops up to me every single time was the Aegis Helmet or the Helm of Aa. And of course, looked more into it, tried to really understand where it came from, what happened. I went down this entire, as they call it, wormhole of the internet, trying to figure out things. And I finally settled on it. And I said, yep, I got it. And I actually have a tattoo. You know, so it's not a quote unquote Viking symbol per se, but more of a Icelandic stave that was made later. It still correlates.
For sure. That's an argument I've had with people so many times online. Because the Helm of Aa is always one that I kind of am unsettled on whether I would call it a Viking symbol. What do you think, Matthias? Because obviously, I know we've spoken about this before, but it is referenced obviously in Fafnir's lair before, probably after Stig has killed him, I think, when he goes in, and there is a reference to something as the Helm of Aa. I'm guessing it's not that symbol.
Well, I mean, we don't know what the symbol looked like if like in that reference. I think it's Snorri Sturluson who mentions it. We don't know exactly what that would have looked like because Snorri didn't do a drawing or anything. So
imagine if he did, how much better and easier would that have been?
Right.
If he'd have just done as a little sketch on the side.
So yeah, so there's not any depictions from like the 1200s that can give us an idea. But then we have later manuscripts, right? And there's most people would be familiar with the Huld manuscript from the 18th century. That's where we get the Vegvisir as well. But there's really a bunch of manuscripts out there. These so-called Galdrabækir. So that just means like magic books that have a lot of sigils in them, and most of them are not half as interesting as the ones that people have picked out that have now become like the most popular ones, like the Aishjalmurrand and the Vegvisir. Like most of them are like very much just like some idiot's doodles.
Okay.
It's so very obvious. I think there's like one. It's just like a smiley face with like a bunch of like sort of lines coming out of it, and then like little doodles at the end. You know, that kind of stuff.
That's what my drawings would be like if I did like a manuscript. It'd be smiley faces and dicks. Let's be serious. That's all it would be. It would, because you know it's like, if you get a pen and paper, you're leaving a dick for somebody. They'd be like, this guy's obsessed with drawing dicks. Like, yeah, we all are. All men are. Give us a writing implement and a pen. That's it. You know I'm right. I don't. You both pretend you don't, but
I know you're right. Yeah, you're right. I just watched Superbad the other day.
I think that's where I get it from. Yeah,
right.
I think, but it's so true. That's what I mean. I can't say I didn't have a lunchbox full of dick drawings, because I think that's maybe a little too excessive. But certainly, like in my planner and the back of my books, I might have drawn one or two.
No, in the military, one thing we do, we draw dicks on everything. And I think, like, let's see, we got them in Porta John. We've drawn them in chalk on helicopters. just a giant dick on the underside of a helicopter, just because.
Oh, for sure, yeah. It's like it's just the one thing that comes to mind. But it's like, I don't know. Women don't seem to do it. Like, they don't go to see like dust on the back of a camera, like, you know what's going to look good on there? Some titties. Big pair of boobies. Like, that's not. It's just like.
Sophis is saying that, yeah, they do.
Okay. So whenever I see just boobs on the back of something, that's it. Sophie was there. So, Mathias, why do you think that the Valknut would be so often used with the military? Because
I mean, it's because of its modern popular association with Odin. There's not a lot that can tie it into Odin in the Viking Age and in sort of like a prehistoric context. But nowadays it's been known as sort of like the symbol of Odin. There's also some who say that it's like it's a symbol of the cosmos. So it's like the three triangle interlacing and sort of like the three main parts of the cosmos, like Middle Earth in the middle, and then Ausgarder, the home of the gods, and depending on what people focus on, sometimes the underworld, or Utgarder or Jotunheimer, depending on what they want to call it, right? So the people get a lot of like different associations from it, and I think that's part of it. So when we go back to the Viking Age, we see it. I mean, it is an original symbol from the Viking Age. We don't really understand the context. One of the most sort of like imposing uses of it that I've seen is on the picture stones from the island of Gotland off the coast of Sweden, where you have like these huge picture stones, some of them probably from like the 800s. It's like they're in the peak of the Viking Age, pretty much, right? The pagan part of the Viking Age. And there are like these very obvious sacrificial scenes where like it looks like somebody is being either it's really difficult to see exactly what it is that's happening, but it kind of looks like he's being drowned in something. In the meantime, you have a bunch of warriors standing behind the person who's drowning this figure, and it looks like they're banging their shields or something like that. And then there's a flying bird over it and over the scene, and also then the Valknut that's sort of like weirdly pointing towards the guy who's being sacrificed.
Is that the one that a lot of people say is a blood eagle?
Could be.
Is that the same one?
Yeah, I haven't heard this. If I'm remembering correctly, it's Stora Hamas that we're dealing with here. That's the.
Usually we'd have a producer to pull this up for us so we could look at it. But it's not like I'm salty about him not being here or anything.
So let me just pull it up right there. Now I'm doing Mike's work.
Oh, you've pulled it up as well. We don't need it.
Yeah.
Fuck it, get rid of him. Who's Mike?
So if you can see my cursor, so this is the scene that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. It's not really clear what's happening here, except it does very much look like somebody is sacrificing someone else. There's like this weird bird figure or whatever that is that's like flying right behind the person doing that.
So anybody just listening to this, if you want to pop onto Google, it's Stora Hamas. So that's Stora space HAMMARS, and then you'll see the stone. Can you zoom in on that, Mathias? If you hit, should zoom in a little bit.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so this is the one I was seeing. This is the one I was thinking about. With I've seen people claim that this is a blood eagle. Obviously, you have this bird here that looks like an eagle, or a raven, I guess, and then you got the Valknut, and the guy kind of bent over. And
it's like really difficult to see what is actually happening here. Maybe he's getting decapitated, and maybe this guy who's doing whatever he's doing to him is holding a spear, like it's or an axe. Who knows?
It definitely was like a spear, more than likely to me.
Yeah.
But also heard like things with this story, talking about the story of Hrungnir as well, like at least correlations to that. At least I talked to people and they brought that up. So I'm not entirely certain where they got it from.
So we're told in the story about Thor's duel with Hrungnir that Hrungnir has like a heart made of stone that is spiked in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why this symbol has been interpreted that way, I think, because I mean it does kind of look like spikes, the edges of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a continuing discussion.
Have we got an alien on board somewhere?
Did we get possessed by demons?
Wait, the lady took off in my car. My phone automatically syncs to my car.
Oh no!
I thought it was Mike coming to get us. He's heard me slating him. It's like, fuck these guys. I'm shutting it down.
God, what are they talking about now?
So
let's all just recognize that. Who was it that pointed out that the shape of that stone was kind of penis-like? In the chat. that is something that has been discussed by scholars. Just want to put that out there. Some scholar was like, that's a dick. So just keep that in mind.
I mean, it is. It does just look like a massive willy. Let's be honest. If that's the theme of the episode, then so be it. But it does. Call a dick. That's what I say.
Yes.
All right. It's the theme of the episode of the theme of a lot of episodes, Sophie says, which I don't know what that says about me, I guess. So if we move on to, I guess, maybe a slightly more serious topic, which is one we've discussed on here a couple of times. Obviously, Mara, we first met under not the best pretense, I guess, which is, I don't know if you want to explain or me.
Yeah, I can. So when I started my Instagram as a way to meet up with new people and also to catalog my own journey into Norse paganism. And of course, over the course of time, I've at least had some people who have come out and said some very racial things to me. There was the last situation which Dad's referred to is there's this guy who sent me a message, but then sent me, I had to accept it, and then he sent another piece of it in like a shadow mode or something like that, so that it would delete as soon as I left the chat.
Okay, kind of like a Snapchat type situation.
But kind of hide as soon as I leave the chat. And I was like, well, do you not realize that I can just screenshot this? This is the
I mean, racists aren't always the smartest of people.
So I screenshot it, posted it, and whenever I post things like that, I'm really posting it because I want people that I follow, friends that I have, that if they are following this person or if they have this person following them, they understand who this person is. I'm not trying to be vindictive or malicious or trying to call people out of their names. It's really just bringing awareness to, hey, this is the type of person that is here. If you have him, now you know.
Mm-hmm.
My dog's
We're all celebrating the dog visit that we just got right there.
she'll do it probably a couple more times throughout this week, probably. But with that, I posted it, and I looked up the I'm like, hey, yeah, this is what's going on. And he clearly didn't even understand the mythos, because what he said, things we were saying was borderline just sad. He's talking about how I'm the spawn of Muspel and Loki. I'm like, Muspel times a place, right?
He's like,
but I dishonor ancestors. Things. I'm like, and I'm like, by your own logic, by saying I am the spawn of Loki, you are now indirectly putting me in the category of the mythos.
Yes.
I don't joke at this because it's funny to me. But okay, hey, if I'm another spawn of Loki, I mean, hey, I guess I got my good looks from somewhere, I guess.
That's it. Absolutely. It's one of these topics that we've discussed on here a few times, and it's the sad thing is we can speak about it and how it's wrong, but the people that are listening to this podcast by now aren't the kind of people that need telling that this is wrong either. So we kind of get stuck in this weird situation, I guess, of where we're already telling people who know that, who aren't like that.
I mean, there's something to be said for, new listeners. I hope we get them too. And that new listeners also come in here they have their different ideas about things. And some, I hope, can be educated on these issues. Mm-hmm. I don't think we actually mentioned it, but for those who are listening, Mario, you're a black man. And that's the bullshit that you then face once in a while, this racism, right? Yeah. People talking about heritage and saying things like, it's not your heritage, and I'm like, as somebody who I guess then qualifies as somebody whose heritage it is, like I'm a fucking Scandinavian, right? I have to ask, like, what the fuck does that even mean? I see this so often, like people talk about like how they want to connect with like some ancestral heritage when it comes to Nordic mythology, and it's like, sure, yeah, but you know what, I think just fucking do it. For if this is like a philosophy or a worldview or a way of thinking about things that fits for you, like that works for you, it doesn't have to. You don't have to have any like blood relations or anything like that.
It's all made up anyway. Like borders are only there because we say they're there. They're not a real thing. They don't really exist. They're just, we say, oh, this line here, you can't. That's our land now. And the whole thing's just so nonsensical to me. I don't understand it. It's so when you really think about it, it's at what point does it really matter, like where people were born? Because everyone in America, or in the USA, technically, most of them all come from Europe, or maybe if they're natives, probably walked over the Bering Land Gap from Siberia at some point. So it's like, so is nobody technically from the US, or the original peoples in the UK that came over from Europe? Is nobody from the UK? Because when you go back far enough, then there's no one there. So at what point does it stop? Or is it just that it stops at the point of the history that you're relating to, or the point you want to make? So it's like with people with Vikings, like, oh, well, in the Viking age, they were mainly white. I think, well, it's not the fucking Viking age, so shut up. It's that simple. Like, it's not. We don't live in the Viking age. It's 2021. If people want to, and just enjoy whatever you want to enjoy. And I imagine these people, like, most of them you don't get to see them. And I always try to have a look at their Instagrams or the Facebook page. But you guarantee that they will, whether knowingly or unknowingly, enjoy things every single day of their life that come from other cultures. Whether it's one of them might go shoot a gun. Well, guess what? The gunpowder probably comes from, it started out in China. So what? You can't fucking have the gunpowder no more. Or there'll be something else that comes from another culture. Like, just enjoy it.
Racially pure Northern Europeans hunting with spears. And that's it.
And then it's like, well, who fucking came up with the first spear? Like, or anything.
It's that one too.
I don't understand it. And that's kind of, I think, what makes it even more frustrating is just that I can't seem to comprehend why anyone would ever think this
It's
way.
also the problem is also that there is like this idea which you sometimes see like in sort of a quote unquote benign way that there is something special about like Scandinavian genes or Scandinavian blood. I get this like in like very random situations where somebody who's from somewhere else in the world will say that just casually, oh, but you guys have good genes and blah blah blah, and I'm like, no. Do you guys know how many evolutionary bottlenecks we've been through because of famines and plagues and all that stuff? We have been cultivating some very serious genetic diseases up there.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why that's a good thing.
When I look at people with that type of ideology and thought process, I sometimes wonder if it is, and the way I like to think about it is that there is a insecurity within their own identity. Like they have an understanding of who they are as a person and as a personality. And so they latch onto a idea and they follow a trend that gives them some sense of security. Now, whether it's good or bad, it's all dependent. But I think that is probably the biggest seed of it. It's just that they feel lost, especially within the modern age, as it were, and they don't know how to self-identify. So they choose an ideology that allows them to feel powerful.
For sure. You've hit the nail on the head, I think, with insecurity, because that's what it comes down to. And it's not just with culture. I think humans in general are just incredibly insecure. I was talking to Eddie, the guy that works with me the other day, just about how people struggle to be happy for other people. So, like, if something good happens to their friends, there's this innate feeling of jealousy or anger, or because someone else has got one up. Something's good happened for them, so that somehow means that you're doing worse, or somehow has a negative effect on you. And so many people just get this feeling and aren't able just to be happy for other people. They can't just look at someone and go, "Oh, that's nice. You've done something good there, or something nice has happened to you. Well done for you. That's really cool." And I think that's similar to how it is with this. Is that some people look at it and go, "Oh, this is my culture. This is like the white European culture," and they see someone like you that's enjoying it and respectfully, clearly taking the time to learn it, and they go, "Oh, well, that doesn't quite fit. This is mine, and you're somehow going to take it away." And it's like, well, no. Here's the thing. Why do you both just like it at the same time and then talk about it and enjoy it together? It doesn't. But I think people just have this feeling that it's one or the other. It can't be both together. It's all mine, or if you come over, then you're going to steal it away. And it's like, that's not how shit works. We all can just get on, just fucking enjoy stuff together. Right, I'm off. That's me done.
Soapbox moment.
That's it.
You're right. So, throughout my experience with everything, and with North paganism, I tend to want to come from a point where I'm trying to learn as much as I can. I find that there are parts of North paganism that really, really resonate with me. And if I look back at the experiences in my own life, I can see that I was in a way being pulled to this path all this time. And this is just my spiritual path that I've chosen. I feel like I was called to it, but at the same time, I chose to follow through with it. And I'm walking this now with a respect for everything that has come before, but also looking at what is now and what is possibly to come. I I try to avoid like all the dogmatic views of things. I like having conversations with people, especially on my Instagram. Like if somebody has something they want to talk about, please message me. I will talk with you because I'm just curious. Maybe you're going to tell me something that I didn't think of, and it's like, now I've learned something new, and I can use that as a way to also enhance my own life.
So you said before that you didn't get into sort of Norse paganism from the military, which is, I guess, where I stupidly assumed where it would have started. So how did it? Where did it all start? Is it something that was passed down from parentage, or are you kind of the first one who's taken this route?
Oh, I am 100% the first, I believe anyway, in my family to go on the Norse pagan route. Now, I can say, like I said, that it did not start for me as diving into the blue hole of Norse paganism in the military, but I will say the seeds were put there from even back then. Let me kind of bring this everything back full circle here. So in my own life, I started off with no religion, no faith system when I was a kid. Then I asked my parents because they, in the 90s, you had all these shows. You watched 10 Commandments every Easter and all the other things, very Christian background. And I did not have a reference for it. So I said, hey, come on, Mom, Dad, you take me to church. Went, and okay, I'm in awe of the church building, but I just felt disconnected from everything. But of course, time went on. I still just kept going. Then my folks and I moved out of the country to Belize, where my parents are actually from. With that, taking care of my grandfather before he passed away. But on my mom's side of the family, it's very much a very Hudon type culture. Now, at the same time, they still let me go to church. So it was that disparity between, okay, we're doing pagan-like things, but you're still sending me to church every Sunday. It was just all confusing, and I just kind of pulled away from all of it. It did just not make sense to me. And I just started looking at philosophy of life, getting martial arts, things like that. But at the same time, and I'm going to call credit to, video games in a way, the image of Fenrir from Final Fantasy was my first intro to speak to anything Nordic related.
Oh, wow.
But even before that, I was always going out into the rainforest of Belize, just getting out in nature, because that's where I felt the most calm, where I felt better than anything else. Now, fast forward years later, and I'm in the military, and of course, I told you I'm looking at my tattoo, and that the Age of Solomon keeps popping up. So, of course, that really leads to my first big seed of Norse mythology and Norse paganism. As I started doing the research, I was trying to understand the symbol, understand the stories associated with it, things like that. Then moving, of course, years later, after I got in the military, I'm with my fiance now. I had kind of developed this point where I still believed in something greater than myself, but didn't have a name for it, and I kind of just relied on my own strength, my own power, my own ability to make things happen. But I was unsatisfied with that. Especially when you're having a rough time, you're dealing with, mental health issues as far as PTSD and other things like that. Everybody has something they want to call to, no matter who you are, no matter what you really believe in. Everybody wants to call on something greater than themselves, especially when they're in a rough time. So
absolutely, I think it's a natural thing that probably just makes it a little bit easier in the moment.
Yeah. So with that, I started looking at different things and looking at different paths and faith systems. But what kept coming back to me were Norse pagan iconography, ideas, thought processes, and even looking at my own history and looking at my own experiences in life, where I grew up with I raised myself in a way where I love books. I love reading about tales of, courageous warriors and people with honor and so on. And of course, it has affected my personality in a way to a point where I cannot stand people that don't have a shred of honor to them. It will irritate me to no reason. But I live my life in a certain way. So with that, I really looked at Norse paganism very strongly, but with that, I still had to do a lot of research, understanding, what my perception was versus what the reality was. And then also the hindrances and possible negativities that were present, because one Norse paganism is that unfortunately it does get a bad rep, which
Absolutely.
wholly unwarranted when you understand what it actually entails versus perception that everybody has about it. So when I finally I was really dissecting my decision, trying to decide if I was going to really jump down this path, and I ended up with a sign, as it were. Everybody says, give me a sign, and well, there it was. To this day, I still keep that, to myself, because I feel like that was really meant for me.
Okay. Yeah.
But that solidified it 100% for me, and I have not looked back since. It's been a roller coaster ride of new thoughts, new knowledge, emotions going crazy at times.
Oh, I'm sure.
Feeling like I'm losing my mind and getting anxious. There was a point, actually, at one point where I was stressing out, and I almost wondered, like, is this what Odin felt like when he was trying to prepare for Ragnarok? Just losing my mind, trying to take care of things. And it's helpful for me because the stories of the gods, they present themselves very humane. And yes, these are deities, but they're not perfect. They're subject to thoughts, emotions, tempers, and even their own hubris. And so it helps me to understand myself in a way. And as I look at the stories in the Eddas and even just like the Havamal, it's almost like I feel to me, it comes off as like a grandfather telling his grandson stories. And that to me is great, because I did have a great relationship with my grandfather, who, was another soldier himself in World War II. And he would talk these stories, but they were always kind of disjointed because he also had Alzheimer's, but he would lose himself depending on what he was talking about. And so in a way, it correlates exactly with how the Eddas and how the Havamal is written and, told. And so now here I am on this path and loving every minute of it.
Good. I'm glad. I guess what do your family and friends think? Because like you said, do you have this culture can have a little bit of a negative connotation, especially when things happen like the storming of the Capitol building. You get that fuck nut up there with his
that guy
tattoos, but it then thrusts it out into the media sphere, and it's all over the news, and then people who aren't heavily involved in this world see it and then just assume that everybody that's into this stuff is racist. So I kind of wondered what your parents thought of you taking this path, and whether they had that kind of preconceived notion of like, why would you go in this direction if it's can be quite negative in that way.
So as far as my parents are concerned, they didn't care. They were saying, "Hey, what you gonna do? What you gonna do?" My brother, the exact same way. Though he did, and my sister did also recommend, hey, look into other things as well. While I was on my path looking for path to follow, once I settled on it, they were fine with it. They had no issue with it. And as far as my friends, I have a very tight circle of friends, and most of my friends are actually pagan as well. and those that aren't don't have an issue with me at all. They don't consider it the problematic in any way, and that's fine with me. And even when I meet people out, I wear my Mjolnir proud. I don't hide it. I wear it outside of my shirt at all times. And people ask me about it, and in which case I tell them the truth. I say, yes, I'm Norse pagan. I reference different things about it so they can understand what it is versus what it isn't.
I think
most end up leaving with either thought processes or they want to explore more. Sometimes they even come back and talk about it after they've done their research, which is great.
That I think that's so important because, especially you wear it and you wear it proudly, because that must confuse some people. Some people that have automatically got this preconceived notion that I guess maybe it happens more in the US than over here. Because I could wear my Mjolnir like outside down the street, and I don't think anyone would bat an eyelid. I don't think anyone would care. I don't think anyone would think twice about it. No one's going to say, "Oh, you're racist" or anything like that. But you do hear stories of that happening in the US where people wear the Mjolnir out, and it can be seen as being quite negative. So I guess anybody who's got of that opinion and they see you walking down the street with a Mjolnir out, their head must fucking explode.
I definitely think so. Like, wait, what? Oh, hold on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, there are definitely communities in the U.S. where like you could get in trouble. Like I think I've referred to a friend of mine before who's they're American but have a Norwegian ancestry and just really actually has a Mjolnir because it's part of like Norwegian heritage more than anything. They don't believe in Nordic gods or anything like that. They just have that, and
it looks cool, doesn't it? Let's be honest.
It does look cool, yeah. And they don't really feel like wearing it anywhere because they're worried that they're gonna take shit for it.
That's so sad,
right? Yeah,
and
it really is.
And that's why I've said it a million times on here, and I say it to anybody that I ever engage these conversations with, that it's so important that as a community we are very outwardly spoken about this. Because I got into a conversation yesterday with a gentleman because I'm a knob and I troll people on Facebook, and he was of the mind I was saying earlier about how this is white European culture, and it's kind of like it's such a sad word to say, but it's like it's tainting it if like non-white people get involved in it, and it's like, and he's trying to defend himself saying, I'm obviously the typical thing of I'm not racist. This is just like our culture. And it's like, well, first of all, that's just a fucking stupid sentence. Shut up. And then it's just, I completely forgot what I went off. I was ranting that hard then that my fucking brain just fizzled. I've completely fizzled out. No, but I go into the conversation and people who are reading it, I guess, get a little bit confused, and they say about how, it's not necessarily saying anything wrong. Why should we? The common one you see is, why should we feel bad for being white or whatever, or why should that's one that pops up a lot, or just that kind of basic thing of
right.
People
right.
saying
It's this idea that basically because what these, if I remember the screenshot you sent me correctly, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's basically arguing that this is like a culture that is for white people, right?
So, I think to clear up my previous rant that I lost my fucking brain on, to give it a little bit of context. So basically, a guy posted an image saying, Nordic culture against white supremacy, or some against white supremacy, or something like that. That kind of image that's, unless you're a dick, you can't really find fault with. It was just just something he posted, and he's just like, look, there's a community, like we should be against this. And this gentleman was like, "Oh, but why should we be so apologetic of because we're white? Like it's our culture. We shouldn't be." And it's like, but you're missing the point completely. Like you're in this bubble of like this little situation going, "Oh, this is mine. You can't take this away from me if anybody else likes it." Whereas in the reality is, as a community, we need to be outwardly saying to people who aren't involved in this culture, "Look, this is not what we're like." Because unfortunately, the average Joe sees things on the news and goes, "Okay, they're all like this," when the reality isn't. And unless we, as a community, speak out against that and make it very much clear that that is not who we are or what we agree with, then people on the outside will keep assuming it, like the people who judge people for wearing a Milner. And I think I got there in the end after losing my mind for a second.
No, it's I agree. It's first of all, there's nothing wrong. Like unless you're a racist, there's nothing wrong with saying I'm an anti-racist. Like this can never be a problem.
No,
if you know what I mean. Like so anybody who wants to. Like if there's a situation where somebody goes, "Hey, I'm an anti-racist," regardless of whatever context, they say, "I'm an anti-racist. I want racism to get the fuck out of here and never to be seen again." And somebody goes like, "Yeah, well, what about my pride in being a white guy?" And it's like, no, shut the fuck up. I don't want to hear it, man. Like there's no room for that. Like,
the problem is
like,
though,
everybody just needs to go, yes.
Yeah,
and then
the thing is, the ultimate pride is wanting to share with other people. Because if I'm proud of something, I want to share it. If I carve a sweet horn, I'm like, "Look, everyone, look at this. This is really cool." So if you're really proud of, quote unquote, your whiteness or your white culture, then you should be happy to share it with other people and go, look at this cool shit that we have in like the Nordic culture and the Norse mythology. Come and enjoy it. Like more the merrier. Come and read the stories. Let's all talk about it. It doesn't have to be, "This is mine, you lot stay away." It's true pride is wanting to share.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and even going further there, you could also say that the culture doesn't have any skin color. Like,
no.
It doesn't come with a fucking skin color in that way. So why should it even matter?
I mean, how I look at that is, okay, people say, well, I should be proud, I should be proud to be white. And I'm like, well, tell you what, no one said you didn't have to be proud of your heritage and your culture. Nobody said that. Or if they did, they need to push the face.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. You look, if you want to really take into context, let's go back into historical. The Norsemen were not just Vikings, they were also traders, they were also farmers. They brought things back from other cultures into their own. They took things from their culture and brought it to other people. It was a common thing. That's how trade happens. And so
but people want to ignore that when it doesn't suit their narrative, obviously.
I mean, of course. But if even at this point, you look at, okay, a lot of people want to bring up, and this was bothered me about my cousin at one point. Like, they took slaves. And I'm like, guess what? Every culture in the world took slaves at some point in time. It's nothing new. Now, where people get really upset is because their connotation when they think slaves immediately goes to, of course, the transatlantic slave trade and things like that, through the West Indies and Africa and so on. And don't get me wrong, that was really messed up. But slavery was a thing. I'm not saying it was a good thing, but in the same way, it did also change the entire scope of the world, because cultures were brought to different places. People were brought to different areas. There is a lot of, what's the word I want to use? Transference between cultures because of this. And so you want to be proud that, hey, you're a Scandinavian person. Be proud that you're a Scandinavian person. No problem with that. You want to be proud that you're Albanian. Be proud that you're Albanian. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem comes where they look at it and say, okay, this is only for a certain type of people, but historical evidence proves otherwise anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Say we're not living in those times. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but we live in a modern day. Get over it.
Mm-hmm. No, I very much agree with you on that, and especially like in the Americas, like what we have now in a country like the United States is a mix of a lot of different people from a lot of different places. Those people who are actually really trying to take away people's cultures are the ones who say that all of these dudes who came from Europe, they're just white people. They're not people with cultures and ethnicities. They just like belong to skin color and that's it, right? And in the same way, what I find incredibly problematic is when all these different peoples who live here are not allowed to share whatever has been brought here from so many different places at this point, right? I mean,
that's the insane thing, is that the USA is made up of so many different cultures, so many different peoples moving there and all coming together to build what arguably could be, some people will say, the best country on earth. Whether you agree with it or not, they're a powerful country, and it's made up of tons and tons of different immigrants. That's just a fact. Like, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. All coming together, putting their culture, their ideas together to make this country what they want. Kicked us fuckers out. Like, no, we don't want none of you guys. We're going to do it ourselves. But then when they build it up to a certain point, they go, oh, no. But now it's ours, and we don't want to share it with anyone else. Like, we don't want to have the other cultures now. It's like, well, gotta pick and choose, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a tough situation, I guess. And it's sad that it happens. It's sad that we have to have the conversation. It's just something that, but the other thing is I don't necessarily see it disappearing anytime soon either, which is unfortunate. I mean, Mary, I don't know how often you get shitty messages or things like that. I know from my personal experience from the models we've used, it happens pretty much. If we post a model, our clothing with a black model or anybody who's not white, typically we might get like one comment on every post. So it's enough that people feel brazen. That's the other thing, is that people feel brazen and comfortable enough to fucking say it. And just, that's absolutely insane. Like, obviously this guy messaged you in private thinking he wasn't going to see it, but like, people post on our post, comment on our post straight up using the most abhorrent things, like just straight out with the N-word or referring to black people as monkeys, like all sorts of fucked up shit, which we just block, delete, report. We have like a zero tolerance. I don't share it because I don't want to give anybody any clout for it. It's just fuck off with that. But it's just that anybody even thinks that it's okay to put that out there publicly. Like, it's fucking mind-boggling. Like, they type that out and think, yeah, I'm gonna hit send here. Publicly, it's okay to do that. Like, fucking smash your head against a wall. Like, your brain must be mashed potato. And for anybody that's not English, that's potato that you mash up. I don't know if you have it. We really like it up here in the north of England. You just smash it up, put some butter in, some garlic, and it's really nice.
That's how we do it in Denmark too.
Be nice, actually.
So yeah, no. I mean, how often does it happen? Is it rare, or are you finding it more, less?
So I've had a handful of those, and I've had some, like, the ones that I tend to post are the ones that are just really out there, and most of the time because they're so funny it doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of my first ones was this guy saying that well, if I can be, Norse pagan, he can be a Zulu warrior. I'm like, you do know that Norse paganism is a spiritual path and a faith system. Zulu is actually a tribe of people.
Mm-hmm. And you could probably argue that if a white guy went and lived with a Zulu tribe and did what they did and adhered to what they were doing, and just mucked in with everything else, that they probably wouldn't give a shit about his skin color, and they would be like, yeah, fucking come and help us out. That's what would happen.
I mean, it's a thing, but I mean, so like, as far as how often I get these, it's honestly not very often. I mean, I know I get a few more finessed versions every now and then, but it's not a regular occurrence, which is great. Now, as far as I'm gonna touch on this right here. Everybody, people focus on followers and things like that sometimes on Instagram and so on. I personally don't care, but I do know that, so the guy that the last situation, he had been following me for quite a while, and then now decided to say something. So my thing is this: clearly, despite the fact that you might not like what I represent as far as his ideology and so on, his identity, you're still watching my content because I'm doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't like me, you don't like what I represent to you, don't watch.
Yeah.
Just don't watch. And, if you do like what I'm saying and it's nothing bad, watch and learn. If I had something to teach, if not, then just unfollow and say, hey, you know what, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
Just enjoy, and if you don't like it, move on.
Yeah, but if you have an issue with anything that I say, whether if I said something wrong, message me with respect, and guess what, we'll have a conversation, and maybe I might actually say, I was slightly off on that, let me make a course correction. Mm-hmm. If now, as far as am I going to leave this path, well, my personal response is, you can go screw yourself. This makes me happy. It helps me to find a sense of peace and calm in myself, and it allows me to be a better person. So to that end, I'm not changing. Good. Sorry. Not good. Sorry.
That's the best answer. And let's move on from this topic. There, we said we were going to talk about the Völuspá a little bit. I know, Mario, you had some questions. Mathias, do you want to, for anybody that doesn't know what it is and what we learn from it, do your teacher thing?
Yes. Yeah, sure. I can just put on my teacher hat for a second.
Give a quick rundown.
Völuspá is the title of the most prominent poem in the collection of Eddic poetry that we call the Poetic Edda. You can sort of like translate the title to the prophecy of the seeress. A vulva is a seeress, a female seer, and so this is an interesting poem because it gives us this whole outline of like cosmic time. We start with the creation of the world, and then we move on to bits and pieces about Baldur's death and the first war in the world, and like a couple other things here and there. But the 2/3 of the poem is really about Ragnarök, the end of the world. So that tells you a little bit about the focus that the poet also had. Is like, yeah, let me talk about how shit's gonna hit the fan. So that's sort of and just to give you a sense of the age of this poem. The earliest version of the poem we have, so this poem we have in 3 versions. The earliest one is actually the one that Snorri Sturluson is using as a source when he's writing his prose description of Nordic mythology in 1220. The one that you will be reading if you pick up a book that says the Poetic Edda is usually the one from the Codex Regius manuscript that was found in the 1600s. Now, this manuscript was written about 50 years after Snorri, so in the 1270s. And then we also have another version of it, which is a little later. This guy named Haukur Erlendsson, who wrote his own little book where he put in a bunch of stories and included the poem. And that one also features Christ, actually. So he was like looking at this material and he's like, this needs Jesus. So that was a portion, a part of that. Now, theories about when it has been composed originally range, vary greatly, of course. But scholarship in general seems to have settled upon late 900s, early 1000s. So that puts us within the time frame of like, this is possibly a pagan poet that has composed this. And the theory on like the content and all of that stuff, like inspiration, that I personally favor is the one that John Mckinnell, now retired professor of Durham University in the UK, has put out, where it basically says that, because it's very obvious that there are parts of the poem that definitely have been more or less copied from St. John's Gospel, and perhaps some other sermon content. And John Mckinnell has then tried to explain how that could work out, but still not be sort of like a Christian creation, so to speak. And what he has told us, suggested, is that basically we're dealing with a poet who has gone to church, but is probably not a Christian, so he's not been baptized. And so you have to ask yourself, in that time period, what does it mean to go to church? And it means that you get let into that portion of the Easter sermon that's all about hellfire and brimstone. And if you don't convert, you're going to spend the rest of your life in hell. So that really explains how this poet could have picked up those bits from St. John's Gospel in particular, because that's all hell and hellfire and brimstone and all that stuff. So it's probably, in that sense, religiously, it's a syncretic poem. It is mainly pagan, but it samples elements from Christianity that sort of fit into this pagan worldview. It's very obvious.
It's not like the Christians to shoehorn their religion into anything.
No, right? I mean,
that's very uncharacteristic, isn't it?
Right? And we also know that this story existed in the 10th century, or elements of this story existed in the 10th century in England, right? We have the Gosforth cross as an example that has an image of Loki bound in the underworld and Sigyn holding the bowl that's supposed to prevent the dragon or the snake's venom to drop into his face. Otherwise, he's going to be shaking so much he's making earthquakes. That's what Snorri Sturluson tells us. So like this, we know that this story circulated in Scandinavian England at this time, right? So that would be your neck of the woods, Daniel. And yeah, it's definitely a poem that's, Snorri Sturluson could definitely relate to the content of the poem to Christianity. That's why he's using it as his main source in his prose version. Mm-hmm. But as I said, also they probably also looked at it and thought to themselves, "Oh, this is some pagan stuff that we're dealing with here." Mm-hmm. So yeah.
So is it Odin's? Does it start with following Odin to the Seeress, or
no? It starts in medias res, so without much introduction, where the Völva, she goes, Hjós byrðik alla helja kindir, Meri och Minimög och Heimdalar. She says, listen, well, it's this listen to me, or shut the hell up, everybody. I am going to tell you something now. And then she calls on everybody who is Heimdalar, sort of like the family, descendants, relatives. Sorry, what?
The greater and lesser children of Heimdall.
Yeah. So the murder is perhaps could be more appropriate to translate it to like relatives.
Okay.
But yeah. So the implication is, of course, that since Heimdalar is probably the god who has engendered humans, at least that we can deduce that from some stories. Then, and this makes sense in this context too. Then, so yeah, we should probably understand it as children or descendants of Heimdalar. And then she says that Valföður has asked her or commanded her to tell this story of the creation of the world and the destruction of the world and everything. And she, in stanza 2, she goes into like her memory and tells us how she remembered the earliest times when the world tree was just an acorn underground, like in the soil. And she tells us that she was raised by giants, which is really interesting. She remembered that the Jötnar who raised her in ancient times. She remembers. She talks about new Evildir, and it's not clear what Evildir means, but it's usually translated to it's like 9 mothers ish kind of scenario that we're dealing with here. So again, something that hints at Heimdalar, who has 9 mothers. And Evildir could mean witches or something like that. And then she goes on to tell us about the creation of the world. And we must assume that she was there, right? Because she was literally she was there before the world tree had even grown, right? Yeah, and then we get the whole description of how the world was created.
Is this kind of like a Mother Nature type feel?
What do you mean? Mother Nature type feel?
Well, her kind of like being everywhere and there at the birth of everything.
So this is really interesting, right? Because they're like different.
Can I imagine she's not just stood there watching? Like
just hanging out.
Yeah, like a little old lady stood there whilst the world's being created. I imagine her more as an omnipresent, omnipotent being.
You can definitely deduce a lot of things from this. I personally think that what is like the underlying mythology that we're actually dealing with here is one that's quite different from the story that we would otherwise be familiar with about the creation of the world. This is like with the ice and the fire, and we have this primordial giant named Ymir and all of that stuff. That's Snorri Sturluson. That's his stuff. So what we get in the prophecy is the Völva tells us that the world was void. It goes like Arvas aldathar Ymir byggði var sandarni segin svale unnir, and so on and so on. So in the ancient times, or in the beginning of time, when or where Ymir lived, that Ymir byggði is also a version of it, as far as I remember. So this character named Ymir, right? But she gives us no other details about him. And she doesn't tell us that he was like a giant. She doesn't tell us that he was slaughtered, as Snorri Sturluson does and other poetry does. She just tells us that he existed there And then she goes. Then she tells us there was no sea, no beaches, no cool waves, no land, all of these things. No, and there was no grass as well, so no plants. The world was simply void. Mm-hmm. Then she says, until the sons of Bor bjöðum Ipthu, and this is this is complicated to translate. It could be translated to something like until the sons of Bor raised the world. And the implication might then be that they raised it out of a primordial sea. So what we have here is a very different creation story than the one that Snorri tells us, which is, where the primordial giant Ymir is slaughtered by Odin and his two brothers, Vili and Ve, whom Snorri tells us they're the sons of Bor. That's not actually what the poem really says, so we can't really be sure that is true. And then they create the world from his body, right? It's possible that the version in Völuspá is actually a much older version that is kind of shared across the northern hemisphere. You see similar types of stories in the Siberian area. The Finnish creation story is, as we know it from Kalevala, is a story about a earth mother, and also the building of the earth by, I think it's a loon that drops into the sea and then starts building earth on the earth mother, by like taking mud from the bottom of the primordial sea. This is a very similar story that we also find in North America, actually. That's where the whole Turtle Island idea comes from, that the world is built on the shell of a turtle, from a primordial sea.
I like that one.
Right?
That's the one. That's the one I want to be real. So there might actually be two creation stories in Nordic mythology, because the other one with Ymir and the creation of the world from his body, that one we know from Grimnismal, so Grimnir's sayings. We also know it from Vathrunismal, sayings of Vathrunnir, and these are also very old poems. And they're very distinctly describe this like scenario of the world being built from his body. His flesh turns into the soil, his bones turn into the mountains, and all that stuff. And that's also a very old story, but it seems to come from the south. Find similar types of stories in for instance, in Vedic mythology, right? So, and actually, I believe there is one Native American creation myth. Is it the Zuni? Perhaps there's some tribe in this American Southwest also has a creation story that's quite similar to the giant, whose body becomes parts of the world. So
like as I look at the Völuspá, and it's like because like I said, the way how the Eddas are structured, at least how they've been written out in different variations, there's no sense of linear time. Now, of course, when we to understand to also kind of look at that, there's a point where time isn't the way that we perceive it as it was back then. It was okay. There's day, there's night, there's this many things, but that's about it. They ran on a lunar calendar rather than a solar calendar, if I recall correctly. And so time, the understanding of time is different. Now, the fact that the Eddas were compiled, so more likely they were orated to over the years, and Snorri got a handle on each one from different places, that may also attest to that. But when you look at the correlation between different stories, there's some variation where it says that Odin summons the Sirius from death, to answer questions about the end of the world, and thus you get the whole prophecy of Völuspá from the very beginning to the end. And then, of course, you have Grimnismal, which talks about the beginning of the world. And so one of the things I always kind of wondered about is, in that vein, how do we look at that? You know, is the Cirrus that he is getting this information from, was it somebody who did die? Because there's in many cultures they say that the dead know not time nor place. They are everywhere. They know all things, which is why various occult cultures, even going into ancestral worship, we ask the dead questions because they know what has come before, what is now, and what shall come. Mm-hmm. And they always say, don't ask too many questions about the future because that was a disaster. But at the same way, the way you're explaining this, it also seems in a way that the Cirrus is not actually a Cirrus, but at least how I'm interpreting it is that she is fate itself. The Norns are the spinners, or the carvers of fate. But what if she is fate itself, just speaking through a medium?
So there's a couple of things. So we do have this other poem called Baldur's Dreams, which is just 12 stanzas where Odin does go and wake up the Völva in the underworld to gain knowledge about Baldur's death. And then, of course, we have this story called the Short of Völuspá that comes at the end of Hundluhljóð, so Hundla's song, which is a later poem. And they are, so Völuspá, Hundluhljóð, and Baldur's Dreams definitely belong to the same sort of conceptual tradition of like a prophetess telling us something, and then we have to ask ourselves, where does that prophetess come from? And suggesting that the Völva in the poem, in the prophecy of the Cirrus, is sort of from the is fate herself is a very good guess. I very much like that idea. There's also what I was hinting at before is that she's perhaps that creator goddess that we find in sort of like a very deep layer of the mythology. Then is almost a layer that has disappeared now, right? The question is, so what is the relationship between the Nornir, the goddesses of fate, and the Völva, and also a bunch of other female deities and other supernatural female collectives like the Valkyrie or the Disia and so on? And that is a very good question. like how do all of these figures relate to one another? What is really interesting is that if you sort of like put them up together, you can definitely sort of draw lines from each type of female supernaturals being a spirit or deity in the mythology, and then to central concepts like fate, control over death, life, of course, also, and then warriorhood as another thing that they also very often intersect with. Of course, we know the Valkyrie is the ones who are there to pick you up from the battlefield and bring you to the realm of the dead, or choose who dies. But we also have the Disia sometimes represented as warrior females that follow you along, the follows a warrior, right? So that seems more companion-like than anything else.
Yeah.
and then we have other ways that we can attach these female supernatural figures to warriors and people in general and functions, right? So the Völva, she could. So we know that the Völva was a historical figure, right? Not the one in the poem, but as an idea, as a person who existed in Viking Age Scandinavia. We can see great, very very close crossovers between archaeological material and the descriptions that we have in the literature. So they did have female religious authorities that they would go to for various questions, I'm sure, right? And so that's something that existed. But then, what kind of superstructure of mythology and ideology was attached to this? And this is where it gets really interesting, right? So Leszek Gardela, this archaeologist who works on female warriors in the Viking Age, he's, among other things, suggested that some of them were like literally war magicians. That like if you went to war, you would have this Völva with you, who would like be making war magic. As like a real part of the whole battle, right? So
I love to read that.
Right, that's really cool. I think he just came out with his book, Warrior Women or Women in War. I can't remember what the title is exactly, but I feel like I saw him post something like yesterday about it. So
yeah, I saw it a couple of days ago as well. He's joining us on the 22nd, so we will be able to ask him ourselves. We've had that one booked in for about 4 or 5 months.
We have, yes.
He's a busy boy, but that's an exciting one. Definitely tune in to listen to that one. Yeah,
and so there are all these different ways in which we can interpret these roles, both in a mythological context and in a historical context. But I mean, that they were really fucking important, I think, is not an understatement.
I mean, you can't have life without women.
Exactly.
It's true. Absolutely.
Female.
I think you just broke up then.
Oh, my bad. I said you got to have that female energy somewhere in your life.
Absolutely. Every one of us came from a woman, no matter what. That's undeniable. Yeah. Well, this has been fun. I think we're at a point to wrap it up. If you got, unless Mary, you've got anything else you want to ask Matthias?
I mean, honestly, it's all just very interesting when you look at the historical records, which, I mean, we're finding more and more. You know, I've been trying to keep track of like new discoveries that have been happening while still reading about older discoveries. And then you have the more esoteric points that come straight out of the myths. And so that relation between myth and history is very tenuous, because I think at some point, when does history become myth, and when does myth become history in itself? You know, I mean, if you look just even at the Saga of the Volsung with Ragnar Lothbrok, he is a character who may have actually been real, but he's more so known as a mythological figure. But yet you have actual historical people claiming to be descendants of Ragnar Lothbrok. So it's very interesting. And I'm just always excited to learn more about all this. As I go through every day, there's something new here. Rabbit rabbit hole.
No, you're totally right, and this is the thing. This is also why it's so important that we are aware of what we put into the myths about history, right? That we make sure to guide them in the right direction. I mean, we have been doing the Vikings watch along, and everybody enjoys hearing me bitch about some little detail that's not really historical or something like that. But I would say one thing, like, with a show like that, it is creating its own myth about what history was, right? What everybody who watches that show should, of course, always remember is that it's a story. This is the same thing that those people back in the day in 13th century Iceland were very much aware of when it came to these stories about ancient Vikings and their Viking ancestors and sagas and all that stuff. They knew that these stories were partially made up. This is very clear. They talk about this in the literature in different ways. Some even call them lying stories, which tells you a little bit about their attitude to it, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. People, let's finish the episode how we started with me having a little rant.
Okay, I like it.
So, I got myself into a little Blood Eagle rant because obviously we had, his name's slipped my mind. Luke, the guy who
Luke Murphy.
No, Luke Murphy. That's the one. And we had Luke Murphy on. And so there were people talking about the Blood Eagle in one of the Facebook groups I like to haunt and be people's nightmares when it comes to trolling. And I was like, yeah, look, the Blood Eagle probably didn't exist in the fashion that you guys are showing it. And, like this idea of splitting the back up and taking the ribs out, taking the lungs out, especially the lungs breathing still was outside the rib cage. I was like, look, probably didn't really exist. And then you get met with this idea of people, they like the idea and they've seen it on Vikings and it's kind of become this cool thing. People are like, oh yeah, I'd love to Blood Eagle all the bad people in my life. It's like, shut up, no you wouldn't, first of all. And it's just, they just disregard everything else. Like one guy was like, oh, well, first of all, it was a ridiculous statement. It was that everything we know about the Vikings comes from stories. I'm like, what about all the fucking historical archaeological evidence? Like, what do you mean it all comes from stories? I'm like, so that what? So that means you believe every story you ever told? What? Santa Claus, the fucking Easter Bunny, the fairy, the fucking Tooth Fairy, or what about Jesus turning water to wine? Do you believe that? It's like, what? The idea that, so people believe that everything we know about the Vikings comes from stories, and those stories are 100% true. Like these weren't just real people who made shit up. Like, you can't just believe every story you read. Just because it's written down in a textbook in 2021 doesn't mean at the time when it was written down or when somebody heard it, it wasn't just a bunch of bullshit. And maybe it's true, and maybe you can look at it and take little bits from it that are real, but it could also just be bullshit. Because when I tell a story, I'm adding a few little lies in there because I want to make the story entertaining. I want to make someone laugh from it. So maybe it didn't happen quite how I'm telling it. But then when the next person maybe goes and tells their friend, they're going to tell you how I told them, and so on and so forth. So the idea that it's 100% accurate is insane. And then the other aspect of it is that some people are like, oh, well, you haven't, the other guy was like, oh, well, you haven't actually Blood Eagled anyone, so you don't know if it's real. And I'm like, shut up. That's not an argument. I'm like, because medical scientists know that the lungs can't breathe outside of the cavity. You need the pressure. Like, that's just a thing. Say, oh, well, you haven't really done it, so you don't know. And it's just like, what the fuck do you mean? Like, people, they like, and then he's like, oh, well, you listen to your expert. And I'm like, look, you watched a program and someone got Blood Eagled in it and you think it's cool. This guy did fucking years of research on it, looked at all the evidence, spoke to medical experts, looked at like the stories, the runes.
Yes, but has he watched that YouTube video? That's the real question.
Has he watched King Aela being Blood Eagled? I'm sorry for the spoilers for anyone who's watching the watch along with us. Being Blood Eagled on Vikings. And like, it's just like, I don't understand how people get so attached to these ideas that they just won't separate them from it. And I guess to link it back to what we were talking about earlier, this whole idea of culture and it being like, this is like my white culture. And like now it's like, I really like the Blood Eagle. It's real. And I'm not going to change my mind. It's like people have this, they think that changing your mind is a bad thing. Like you can't just listen to an episode of the podcast with an expert on and go, all right, I thought it was real. Now I don't. It's still a really cool idea, but maybe it's not real. And then change your mind. But some people, they just refuse to do that. They just cannot change their mind, or they see it as being weak. And they will just be fucking wrong all your life then. I don't care.
Nice rant.
I was always going to have a rant with the way the episode started, to be fair.
Yes.
Mario, thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. It was a wonderful conversation. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep wearing that Milner out and breaking brains every time you walk past someone who has the wrong mindset.
Oh man, it's been fun. It's been educational, and I've had a lot of fun talking to you guys. I'll probably talk to you guys some more. Give it a chance.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, man. It was really interesting to hear your story and also your perspective on a lot of things. Heathen to heathen here.
Absolutely.
I mean, I guess to like the audience, if anybody's just curious about like finding me at all, just look up my Instagram title, Traveler Spear. Very easy to find. We want to have a conversation, like you said. I'm open. Let's talk.
That's the best way to be. And without going back into my previous rant, you clearly have a love for this. You have a respect for this. You want to learn. The way you were listening to Mathias with the Völuspá, you picture. I'm guessing you have a poetic Edda next year that you picked up and was starting to flick through. So you're clearly on the right path. You enjoy it. You love it. So fuck anyone else who tells you it's the wrong path, because I guarantee they probably don't spend the time learning what they learn. They watch Vikings and go, "Oh, this is my culture. I identify with this." And so, who's right? The person who loves it and really identifies with it and wants to learn as much as possible and be open, or the guy who's just a piece of shit and wants to tell other people they fucking can't enjoy it? Because I know which person I'd rather speak to anyway.
Exactly.
I've had a lot of rants today. So, Mario, you've shouted out your Instagram. Give Mario a follow. It's Traveler's Spear. You have some pretty cool photos on there as well. I was enjoying them earlier.
I find nice stuff every now and then, and I'm always trying to get out to nature just to walk around sometimes. And other times, I just find things on the internet that are like, this is cool, and I have an idea that this can work with. Let's go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all that matters. Mathias, what about you?
Yeah, you can always find me on social media. You can find me on Instagram. I hate Facebook, but you can also find me there.
Everyone remember, send Mathias Facebook friend request. He absolutely loves it. He wants to. He honestly, he'll say no, but don't listen to him. It's his favorite pastime. He's just accepting new people on Facebook as friends. So just go out there, find it, type his name in, and hit that invite friend button, because he will love it.
Well, see, that was the other thing I wanted to pitch here. Like, we would really like to invite everybody to come to a new Facebook group for the Nordic Mythology podcast. This is Daniel's little pet project. This is
so I can stop going on all the other ones.
Exactly. This is where you get to shout at everybody about how wrong they are, and nobody can kick you out because it's your group.
Oh no, it doesn't. It doesn't work if they all listen to the podcast, because everything I know comes from you. So everything I know, everybody else knows. It's got to be other people.
Right. Yeah.
So, well, I can post things in there that happen in other groups.
You can do that. I mean, and people can also like come into the group and then I don't know, share material that they found elsewhere that they might want us to talk about on the podcast. We can do a little selection and those kinds of things. So yeah.
Do not ask Matthias to translate your runes, though. Please don't do that.
You have no idea how many.
Or do it a lot. Personally, by sending him friend requests and then sending him the runes to translate.
No. Especially after you've gotten the tattoo. You gotta make sure.
Especially after.
Yeah. That's it. What does this say? No, awesome. Thank you very much, Mario. A few last things. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and a positive review. Hopefully you managed to get through this episode with all the hiccups we had at the start. Hopefully it comes out great. As Matthias said, Nordic Mythology Podcast, we have a Facebook group, but you can just follow our page, Nordic Mythology Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, website's nordicmythologypodcast.com. We are trying to push our YouTube channel. So again, Nordic Mythology Podcast on YouTube, just hit the subscribe button. And I think you can have like a little alert button that lets you know when we drop new videos. We're going to be posting some shorts or 3-minute clips from the episodes, or little bits of tidbits from the episodes, teachable moments, probably not me ranting. And the last thing is, if you really, really enjoy the podcast and want to help us out, our Patreon is the best place. We have different tiers from £5 up to £20. You get different things at each tier. Every tier gets to join me and Matthias after the show, where we watch Vikings, the TV show, episode by episode, and let you know what we think. So you get a bonus episode. You also get to sit in on the episodes live, join our live chat, where there tends to always be a lot of dick jokes, which I'm not really sure. But yeah, it's good fun. So like I say, if you want to help us out, that's the best way. It really helps us get new equipment, Matthias has a nice, lovely green screen behind him now when he's recording. So yeah, it really helps us out, kind of keep building, keep growing, keep getting this out to new audiences.
What I really need is a lot of ant poisoning, because I started this episode by saying I had like 17 ants. They multiplied. There's like 30 at least.
If we get to 150 patrons, we will buy Matthias some ant poison. There we go. That's a promise. I think we're on 112 right now. What was that?
Put it down in the shape of a dick.
So yes. All right. That's it. If we get to 150 patrons, Matthias is going to make an ant sacrifice in the shape of a giant phallus. That's what we need. That's what I need in my life.
Yes.
There we go. That's what's going to happen. 150 patrons. We're on 112, so it's not that hard. Maybe the ants have probably all gone by the time we get there, but
I hope so.
I hope not. All right. Thank you very much, Mario.
No
Yeah, thank you, man.